Welcome to Business in the Black, the podcast where ideas become plans, plans become actionable items, and actionable items become results. We're the go-to resource for Black entrepreneurs ready to build, grow, and dominate their industries. Each episode delivers real stories from real founders, their wins, their struggles, and the game-changing lessons that fuel success. From funding strategies to scaling secrets, we're serving up the knowledge, connections, and inspiration you need to transform your vision into victory. This is where Black excellence meets business mastery. Let's get to work. Challenges make you discover things about yourself that you never really knew. Cicely Tyson. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Business in the Black. We really appreciate you each and every episode joining in and learning more from entrepreneurs like J. Ken Harris. I'm going to call him Ken for the rest of the episode because J. Ken, it's like he obviously wants to be called Ken. So we're right here in Atlanta, Georgia. He's with Trait Consultants, and let's just give him a round of applause.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So just jumping right in as we do, tell me a little bit about Trait Consultants.
So Trait Consultants primarily is a mental health. I don't really want to say the word agency, but a mental health service that I provide. But under the umbrella of mental health falls several different subsidies, right? So one thing that I do under mental health is consulting work. So the primary focus was initially mental health services, but I also do some consulting as well.
Okay, great. We'll dive into it for sure as we continue the episode. So I can't wait to just learn more about all the things consulting, because any consultant know, and I'm sure we have some consultants in the audience, that means I do a little bit of this, I do a little bit of that, and it's kind of like all under one umbrella. So we're excited to hear from you.
Awesome. I look forward to it.
Everyone has a story. And your story is filled with different twists and turns. And as our, introductory call was going, you explained a lot of compound loss in your late teen years.
Mm-hmm.
You found your father and he had a heart attack. And then 3 weeks later, your grandmother and your dog died on the same day.
Yeah.
Take us back to that time and how that, compound loss affected you, and how did that experience fundamentally change how you view life and your personal need for support?
So, like you said, it was compound loss, right? And we can take the dog out of the equation, and I know that people love their animals and whatnot, but that truly paled in comparison to the loss of my father and his mother, who I was very close with both. To say that I was numb would be an understatement. It was, for probably the greater part of 5 or 6 weeks, it felt like I was just on autopilot. And I remember some things happening here and there, but it's almost like I lost pockets of time, and then I was just kind of floating through space. I have siblings, and they were there for support, of course, but probably the greatest support was my mother, who I still live with. My parents were together. They were together for 36 years by the time my dad passed. Yeah. So my mother was tremendous support, and in being support to me, it was still difficult for her because she had to manage having lost her husband. So she said, I need to get my child some help as best I know how. And think about it, this is 1996, so I was 16. We can do the math very easily. I'm an 80s baby. And during that time, mental health was not as, I don't want to say accessible, but it was not as readily, it was not something that was as readily as used as it is now. Mm-hmm. And especially in the African American community. But my mother sought mental health services for me. So it was I trust you as you trust yourself to do something. So my mom was like, I'm taking you to a therapist. And I said, okay, I guess that's what I need to do. And so as she was providing support for me, I trusted everything that she offered me because it's my mom.
Right.
And because any additional support would have come in handy. So dealing with all that loss, we're trying to support each other, but then getting an outside third party to help support that that grieving process was necessary at that point, for sure.
Yeah. You talked about your need for therapy and your mom guiding you through that process. However, your therapist that you all, ultimately chose wasn't necessarily ideal in relation to feedback.
Right.
So walk me through, when your therapist said, I just don't know how you're making it. And she teared up through all of your loss.
Sure.
What did that teach you? How did that, affect you in terms of this is not really what I need. This should be done differently. How did how did that shape your understanding of, you know, doing something differently?
I would say it taught me what not to do.
Uh,
Truthfully, there was some disconnect, and the disconnect probably came from the fact that she was female and that
mhm,
she was white. I am not saying that therapy can't happen cross culturally or that cross gender, that it cannot happen. It can happen and it does happen. I've done it.
right.
But there was lack of connectivity between us. And so when she made that statement, she was, I just don't know how you're making it. In my 16-year-old mind, I was like, well, I don't either. And that's why we came? Question mark. So like, how's it that I don't know and you don't know? And if you don't know and you're the professional and
Mhm,
it's one thing to provide empathic statements.
right.
You're really going through a lot. How do you think that you're so resilient, or where are you getting the strength from? That is the statement that I needed in that moment.
Right.
That is what a good therapist does, to bring to light what's going on, but to also recognize where you are and what you're putting into it as an individual. And I never got the where you are and what you're putting into an individual. I got a essentially, you're tore up. I understand why you're tore up, and it's amazing that you're still here, but you're tore up.
Right.
Okay, so now that we're stating facts and you're not really helping me, like, what are we going to do? And as I shared with you, I looked at my mom and she looked at me and we left, because you are not giving the assistance, the support that either of us needed. And my mom stayed in the session with me because mothers,
Right.
um,
Especially black mothers.
black mothers, and my first run at therapy. And she said, once you get comfortable, I'll of course leave the session. You can say what you want to say, but it was in that moment that we knew that this was not a good fit.
Mhm. You are a therapist,
Hmm.
and speaking from my personal experience, I'm a strong proponent of mental health, getting your therapist and all of these things.
Sure.
I typically say just any therapist won't do, because
Right.
people say, oh, just go to therapy. Well, I think you should be very intentional about your therapist,
Absolutely.
because as you said, it's not necessarily a gender barrier or color barrier or
Right.
what have you, but you do need to make sure that the therapist that you have, in my opinion, and we're talking about Brandon's opinion, you need to have somebody that fits what you need, even if it's just at that time.
Right.
From a clinician space or from your personal experience or what have you, what are your thoughts around that statement? Just any therapist will do.
Yeah. From personal and clinician and the clinical space, no, any therapist just won't do. And you sometimes you audition therapists, like you have to see if it's a good fit. Um, in transparency, not every client who has come to me felt like it was a good fit.
Yeah.
I tend to be very direct. Um, Clients can be in particularly emotional spaces when they share things. And when I say this, I don't negate somebody's space, right? But when somebody's crying, I can give empathic statements. And for me, I'm very solution focused. So
Mhm.
it's okay, we're crying. I get it. So now that we're crying, where are we going forward? And some people want to stay in that space for a while. And so because I tend to be solution focused, we run into a little bit of a contentious space sometimes, where it's like they want to stay there. And it's like, okay, you can stay there, but how long are you going to stay there?
Yeah.
And if you want to stay there, that is fine. I am probably not the best therapist for you, because I'm going to encourage you along. I'm going to push you through that, and I'm going to make sure you get through that. So, to that end, you have to do your homework. And just because somebody looks like you doesn't necessarily make them a good fit. Um, Race, gender, ethnicity, any of those things, any person that is a member of a group, that group is not a monolith.
Mhm.
So, me just finding a black male therapist might not be the best fit. Me finding a therapist who maybe was raised in Atlanta, who maybe has similar attributes or characteristics or a similar life experience to me could probably be a better fit in some instances than somebody who is just a black male. So I think that you have to do your homework. Now, would I prefer a black male? Yes, because I think that there are certain experiences that we have as black men that are unspoken, that don't necessarily need to be hashed out, that don't need to be explained. And so if I've got to explain why I felt a certain way when somebody who was white grabbed her purse and I walked by, if I've got to explain that,
right.
I'm exhausted.
Exactly.
And it's already adding to my intersectionality in this thing called life, right?
And you paying by the minute.
That part, let's be very clear. And as a therapist, any part of an hour is an hour.
Right.
So I don't want to waste 7.5 minutes explaining why it was problematic that she clutched her purse when another black male gets it immediately, or more than likely will get it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So there has to be this awareness that I like for my therapist to have, because I do have a therapist on occasion. I don't keep one on retainer, but every once in a while I'll check in. And so I think that it is everybody's responsibility to find the clinician that works best for them and with them, for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Your parents were very hardworking. You have Navy veteran, you have federal government employee. Your daddy was a senior preacher, and, in the Baptist church. In the Baptist church. So, y'all know the Baptist preachers, baby, they don't get much of a break, because the Baptist people are a little different from Methodists. I done been both of them, so I can say that. But anyway, how did watching them, because if your dad was a preacher and they were married, your mom was the first lady, you got to all that play in there, how did watching them pour into others while you were processing grief shape your understanding of both service and sustainable work simultaneously?
That's a loaded question, because there were moments where, I'm sorry, Mom and Dad, there were moments where my parents were more present for other people in the name of service.
Right.
And there's a part of me that gets it as an adult. If home is good and home is taken care of, then you can do other things like that, right? But there were countless times where my dad would get out of bed in the middle of the night to go see somebody's son in jail and help him get out, to do this or do that. To that end, my parents were present for 99% of the things that I did.
Right. Track
meets, football games, spelling bees, induction ceremonies, and things of that nature. But they were spread so thin in some regards. And to that end, I recognize that that can't be life.
Right.
Like, there has to be some semblance of balance. I can't tell you the number of times my dad was what we call bivocational. He worked a full-time job and was a senior pastor. So we're leaving the house at 6:30 in the morning. He drops me off at school. Most of my parents come to work. They pick me up after school. We go home. We get back in the car to drive 45 minutes to church to go to Bible study that starts at 6:30.
Right.
We get there at 6:30. We don't leave there till 8 o'clock. I'm doing homework by the dome light in the car, getting home at almost 9 o'clock at night to basically shower and get into bed and start the day over again. So it was, my mom and I joke all the time and say that I was born on the second pew at church because we were always back and forth to church.
Yeah.
So I knew then that service almost meant that you did not have a life. And I knew that that was not something I wanted. And I also knew that there had to be something better, that there had to be a bit more of a balance with family, with work, with even extracurricular, and even with doing nothing. To this day, my mother, who is 80 years old, feels like it's a sin not to do anything. Yeah. And not literal sin, but she's like, well, I got to go do this. Why?
Right. I'm with you now.
We can sit down.
Yeah.
We can do nothing. And
it's okay.
And I'm also an adjunct instructor. And so in my course announcements, just to kind of break the monotony of education and any type of, them being subordinate to me, I will say one of the things that I love is to have free time and not tell people that I have free time.
Right.
So, because they'll try to commandeer it. And so it's okay not to do something. It's okay to chill. It's okay just to be. And that is not something that was apparent in my home growing up. But as I got older, I recognized that it's fine and it's okay. And so while I appreciate every single thing that they did for me and I recognize the place that hard work has, it also has to be balanced by rest and sometimes just doing nothing.
Absolutely. Now, if I find out in like 3 weeks you done accepted the call to preach, now
I don't know that you're going to hear that about me.
I'm just saying, you might be looking for something to do.
Survey says I don't know that is my ministry, quite literally.
Run up and down the pews.
But I will encourage whomever is down that path.
Hallelujah. Your mother and father, they had a lot going on, but they weren't entrepreneurs.
No.
But your mother's mother, your maternal grandmother was. So you say, she was always selling something, always selling something. And what did watching her entrepreneurial spirit teach you about creating your own path even before you knew or thought about being an entrepreneur?
What I recognized in her is that you can always be doing something for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And even the smallest thing, you can turn into something profitable.
Mm-hmm.
My grandma was selling pecans. Who sells pecans?
Okay.
And there are trees, right?
Yeah.
But my grandma would sell pecans. My grandma would sell peaches. Like she oversaw a peach orchard.
Did she parch the pecan?
Did she what?
Did she parch them?
Yes.
Okay, I'm glad you know what that is.
Yes.
I love some parched pecans now.
She would. And so I just saw that there is always some way to provide for yourself. There's always some way to think outside of the box. There's always some way to make $1 out of 15 cents, almost quite literally.
Yeah.
And that if you wanted it, you could get it and you could obtain it. And it almost did not matter what. There is a niche. There is always a need that someone has. And that if you do your homework, you can find out what that need is and supply that need. And some instances get compensated for it.
A lot of our audience may identify with you when you say your biggest obstacle was really you, hesitation, uncertainty, imposter syndrome. A lot of people struggle with those things. And you had a PhD. I mean, the doctor is not like a honorary, no offense. It's not like I didn't work for this. It's not like it ain't, we talked about Baptist preachers, all of them called each other doctor. Ain't nobody got no doctorate. It's not like that. You had a PhD and experience since, like 2004. And so when you were getting ready to start your business, what was that inner voice telling you that made you doubt yourself? Because, you got a PhD, you got I just can't figure out, what made you doubt yourself first? And then what finally gave you permission to say, you know what, I got this?
You always feel like you're not enough sometimes. And I don't think that there is one day that I leave my house and I'm not reminded that I'm a Black man, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there are certain things that come alongside that. There's certain weights that we carry day in, day out. So even though I have those credentials, I don't wear them on my arm. Right. I don't put them on my back. So there isn't always this immediate recognition of those things. In a professional space, it just took practice and it took a lot of telling myself, no, you deserve to be here. No, you have a PhD like they have a PhD. No, you have a PhD and they didn't even graduate college.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a recognition of what I had done, what I had accomplished. You have this license, you have this certification, you have this experience. And it is not to say that there aren't people smarter than me or people who have more letters behind their name than I do. But what is for you is for you.
Mm.
And I had to rest in that. And I had to know that everything that was coming my way was for me. And regardless of whether or not I felt like I deserved it, it was designated for me and appointed to me. And I should just go ahead and receive it. And so once I got to the point of receiving it and knowing that it was mine, all of those things started to decrease. The hesitancy, the whole idea of imposter syndrome, uncertainty. It was like, no, you should be here. No, this is where you're supposed to be. No, you have put in the time. No, you put in the man hours. No, you're smart enough. And so once I got over myself, quite literally, then it was like, okay, cool. And it didn't come overnight, but it also came with the encouragement of people around me.
Mm.
I would do things for friends and they would give me money. I'm like, yeah, the dog. They were like, sir, you are a whole licensed therapist. I would have to pay a therapist over there to do it. Why wouldn't I pay my friend? Like, why would
Right.
I not invest in my friend?
Right.
And so that mentality, I had to switch gears and start charging people appropriately and putting that charge out there up front. Yes, I can do that. My charge is, so let's be clear as we proceed.
I'm with you when you're right now. I'm with you when
Absolutely.
you're right. Many of our listeners, and the research shows that, Black business owners, when they have a business, when they go into entrepreneurship, it's all they have.
Right.
Now, of course, there's a percentage, and y'all need to go back to a previous episode to figure out what that percentage is, because I've said it multiple times. Thank you very much for listening to my TED Talk. I'm not giving TED Talk any money for that either, so don't think I'm doing that, period. All right, now we can work out some, but no. Anyways, I have to say that because people need to be paying me, okay? But in any case, how do you navigate that tension between faith and wisdom, between risk and security, and how do you navigate that even now? Because I know you have this saying, I move. It's a move of faith, but I'm nobody's fool.
Yeah, I'm nobody's fool in that. So faith is when you make a move and you don't know what the next step is, right?
Right.
Fine. But I also it needs to be a calculated risk for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to explore all possibilities. And wherever I land, I need to be able to know which way I'm going to pivot. So if I take this step, and this is what happens when I take this step, if I do enough scenario building and troubleshooting, most scenarios I speak to.
Mm-hmm.
And if I say, okay, if this is a scenario, this is how this will play out. If that's a scenario, this is how that'll play out. I try to exhaust all possibilities so that when I do make the move, it's like, okay, great. This is where I am, and this is how I need to move, and this is how I need to pivot accordingly. So I am nobody's fool, and I'm not. Faith is blind, so I think that is that's a given, right? But your responses don't have to be blind. Your potential moves don't have to be blind. I think that we should do our due diligence and before we leave to say, if I do leave, what could happen?
Yeah.
What would happen? And if that does happen, will I be prepared for it? So it's a matter of, for me, it's a matter of preparedness once I do make that step versus just blindly making that step and hoping for the best.
We know your story. We know that, you've been a therapist since 2004. That's over 20 years. So, walk me through those early years and what that looked like and, what, initially drew you into therapeutic practice.
It looked a whole entire mess. It is one thing to learn theories and to learn theorists and to have like your practicum and your internship to go through the educational process.
Mm-hmm.
Is another thing to actually put it into practice.
Mm-hmm.
And my first job was with the state, and I was an adolescent and child and adolescent therapist. So if anybody is going to make you work for your money, it is a child
mm-hmm.
or an adolescent because they don't want to be there. Most of them were either dragged or mandated or both. And being ridiculously green, it was baptism by fire.
Yeah.
So it was a rough go initially. One of the jokes we had when you work for the state is that you treat paperwork, not clients. So I would do decent work with clients, but then bringing tons of paperwork home because the 8-hour day was up, but I still needed to chart. I still needed to make notes. I still needed to do this and the other. So initially it was rough. That job actually phased out after 2 years. And that is when I knew I had to change gears because I was almost burned out after only 2 years.
Right.
And that shelf life just didn't add up in my head. It was like I went to school for all these years for all this education, and at that point in time, I had so much student debt, and it was like, but you can't be burned out after 2 years. Right. You can't retire.
Somebody got to pay for this stuff.
So what is we gonna do?
Yeah.
So to speak. And I recognized that was improper grammar. I do that on purpose. But yeah, it was definitely rough initially, but as much as I did not want to, and as much as I tried to accelerate through it, I had to pay my dues.
Right, right.
I had to work as a therapist with an associate license for 3 years. And then after that, I became a fully licensed therapist after 3 years. And so that is when things start to change a little bit. You make a little bit more money. You are in a bit higher demand. The jobs there are some jobs that are just, more jobs are available to you now at a better rate in better places and whatnot. Especially having started out like I started with the state, if you can work there, you can work anywhere. So it was a lot of on-the-job training. It was a lot of not knowing what I was doing, but hoping I was doing the right thing. A lot of clinical supervision and just professional maturity that had to take place initially. And so after that point in time, changing gears, becoming an academic advisor, but also a personal counselor for, it is now Georgia State University, but back then it was Georgia Perimeter. So working there for a few years and just really finding out what worked best for me, how it worked best, and where I flourished the best and flourished the most as a therapist. And then also starting to tip towards, at that point in time, I was starting to tiptoe towards academia.
Speaking of transitions, you started your consulting business. Notice we've been talking about therapy and all the state jobs and all these things. Now we're transitioning into your consulting business
Right.
in 2019.
Okay.
And, starting something in 2019, everyone knows that the very next year, it was looking drastically different. So, you actually started in 2019 offering remote therapy sessions. And then, of course, in 2020, the market got saturated because everybody was doing it, or at least attempting to do it. So how did that saturation force you to pivot from therapist to consultant, and what did that transition feel like?
I was actually really annoyed. And I was annoyed because everybody was jumping on something that I had been doing.
Yeah.
And I can be honest, I didn't do my due diligence with my business. I started it and I went through the proper channels. I got an LLC. I opened up a business account. I did all of those things, but I didn't do ridiculous amounts of marketing. I didn't do a ton of social media. Now, had I done that, I probably would have had a higher clientele and I would have had more clients. I would have had more business. But as things were starting to pick up a little bit, the market was flooded by everybody offering remote therapy. And so if people already had a clientele of 50 or 100 people, they just transitioned online. Nobody was attempting, anybody who was already in therapy was not attempting to forge a therapeutic relationship with somebody new.
Right.
In addition to that, at that point in time, I was not taking insurance. So not taking insurance, was it a good thing or a bad thing? I'm asking myself that question. Yeah. It was what it was.
Right.
I didn't want that hassle. And so if you can call your insurance company and they give you a therapist who's in network, who is remote, who does this, who does that, versus easier. Somebody who you have to do some homework on, who doesn't take your insurance, who you got to pay out of pocket for, it's just easier. So that is why I was annoyed, because what was an open playing field for me was now elbow to back to the shoulder to head to head. Like, it was just much more. And so I actually pulled away a little bit. I was wanting to transition to doing that full time, but I said, it's too much going on. There are too many people. It's too much. My services look so similar to other people's. And we're in a place where I need money. And because my bills come at the same time every month. Yeah. So as opposed to trying to stick that out and figure it out or create a niche, I said, let me get a real job. Yeah. And then I got a real job. And I said, I can do both. I can work a real job while I cultivate this, while I decide which way to go with this. And so slowly but surely, I started to get out of the thickets, so to speak, of traditional mental health and started to see, well, what other way can I go? And that is one of the amazing things about my degrees, is that you can teach it. You can be a therapist. You can, what is I'm doing now, telling therapists how to be good therapists. There are so many different avenues that you can explore. And so because of that availability to me, I said, well, why not explore what you can do with it? And so that's when I started to slide slightly more away from therapy and into doing a little bit more consulting work and being particularly selective about the type of therapy or mental health services that I was providing.
You mentioned finding your niche. Tell us about the process of finding said niche. What is the niche? All these things. Right. And why does it work better for you than traditional therapy?
So I'm going to answer in reverse. Traditional therapy was starting to wear on me. And the minute that I recognize, and not even past tense, but even now, when I recognize that something doesn't feel right, I try to adjust accordingly. And I was becoming disgruntled doing therapy. And if I am not my best, I can't help people be their best.
Right,
and so I started to pull back. And so in particular, I prefer to work with the worried well. So any good therapist knows their target population. They know who they work well with. They know who they do not work well with. I know as for me and my house, it is the worried well. And that is where I flourish and that is where I thrive. They tend to be situational. They tend to be very, very high functioning. They tend to know exactly why they're coming. They tend to be solution focused. I am a solution focused therapist. That is an actual type of therapy. In addition to a couple of other things, but I like to work backwards. What are you here for? Great. What's the goal? In the next 8 to 10 sessions, how can we get to that goal? And so we form a plan and we to work towards that. So that is one of my areas of specialty. But then right now I am in this amazing space of, it's so odd, and it just so happened to happen, completing FMLA paperwork for employees. I actually took a little bit of time for it, and that's the Family Medical Leave Act. It's a federal program where you can take time off, and not just for yourself, but if a family member is sick, if a family member needs attention, if you need attention, you can take sometimes intermittent leave, sometimes blocks of time off at a period of time. And so I have found that specific niche of completing that paperwork. A lot of people think that only your primary care physician can do it, and they can do it. The issue that a number of people who have come to me for paperwork completion is that I got a lot of pushback from my primary care physician. Like, why do I want time off? Why do you want time off that is designated for you? Yeah. Like, I'm not even about to address you with that because I need time off. Right. Like and I don't want to talk necessarily about the poor healthcare system of this nation, but time off has been a prescription for people in other countries for ages.
Right.
We are the only overworked, underpaid society on this planet. Like, doctors literally give patients time off in other countries. I'm going to get off my soapbox.
Yeah.
But that being said, I'm not going to, if you say you need time off, okay, great. Let's discuss your issues. Let's see what's going on. So I'm not just willy-nilly passing it out, but the average person who feels like that is overwhelmed. Anytime you get to a place where you feel, I think I'm burned out, and you were burned out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago, 12 months ago, and now it's just evidencing itself. And so sometimes you do need to recalibrate. You do need a respite. You do need space away from that which is stressing you. And so that is a niche that I have found. And after about a session or two, I know what's going on. I know what's wrong. I have an idea of how much time you need off, and I complete it. And it is one of those things where you're entitled to it. You should make use of it. You need to make use of it.
Right.
So mental health professionals can also complete FMLA paperwork, and that is oddly it's something that I like doing. And it's not as, I remove a lot of the painstaking steps that come alongside a medical diagnosis or something like that. A lot of those steps are removed when you come this way because there is something that needs to be said about the emotional component and the stress component and the anxiety and how that looks different for everybody. But you're anxious when you go to work, your shoulders up by your ears, your stomach, you have indigestion problems, and it's because you're working like this. And so there is a certain emotional aspect that people don't even recognize comes alongside work and things like that. And so, but I love to speak to that, and um, I love to assist people in that process.
Wow. I could have used you a couple of jobs ago, episode 2, by the way. But I could have used you for a couple of jobs ago because they were about to drive me insane, and I knew it wasn't me,
right? And they will give you a full tank of gas and let you drive insane.
Ain't that like nothing? You've practiced therapy for over 20 years. I mean, and you've gotten to the point where you're saying now, I don't want to be in direct private practice anymore. Evident because you're doing the FMLA paperwork, right. You're teaching people to be therapists, all types of different, again, under the umbrella of trade consultants, keeping it in the road. You're doing all of these things, but it's a very bold statement to say, I'm done with direct practice, And so, what was the final straw, or the, you talk about burnout. What was the thing that says, you know what, I'm over this. I got to find something else to do.
I don't know that it was one thing. Mm-hmm. I think it was cumulative, and I just got to breaking point. Sounds so dramatic.
Yeah.
I just got to a point where I didn't feel like I was effective, and if I'm ineffective in something that I'm being paid to do, and something that I have a license and degree to do, then you need to be effective. So what can I do to get back effective? And I'd been teaching at that point. So it was like, you're a good teacher and you take a lot of these concepts that are foreign concepts, but make them make sense to somebody who has not interacted with them before. And you're a good therapist. What can you do to merge these worlds? And so I started providing supervision to up-and-coming clinicians. And at that point in time, you only had to, let's just say this, the requirements were different for supervision back then because I'm old school. I've been in this over 20 years. Mm-hmm. So back then, the requirements were a little bit different. So I started to oversee younger clinicians, and I was like, this is an entire thing. I love hearing the cases. I love hearing their input. I love hearing how they want to handle it, and I love the fact that they are asking me, is this right? Is this appropriate? So I was doing therapy by proxy, and I did not have the emotional weight. I didn't have the emotional distress. I didn't have the burnout that typically comes alongside being in therapy. And it was that distance that I appreciated. So I was close enough to the fire to be warm but not get burned.
Gotcha.
And I liked that. And I decided that is probably where I need to hover and where I need to be. Now, sometimes just to make sure I still got it, I will do therapy.
Yeah.
But again, it's with the word well. It's with someone who does not want to do therapy for a year or two. It's usually very situational. So I do like to stay on top of practice. I stay on top of my CEUs for anybody from the state board watching. I stay on top of my CEUs. I do trainings. I do things like that just to make sure I still stay sharp and stay on top of things. And if I'm going to train a therapist to be a good therapist, I need to know about new modalities. I need to know about the new type of therapies that are emerging. So I like to stay on top of it. And like I said, to make sure I'm still sharp and strong, and just to interact with people in that space, because somebody seeking therapy who was worried well in 2018 is not the same person in 2025.
Right.
Like, we've been through a whole entire pandemic. We have been through, I'll just say, politicalness in this country.
That's where my mind was going.
We have been through a lot in this country, individually and collectively. So the word well doesn't look the same as the word well from 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. So I'd like to, tap in and see what is current, what's going on. How are people functioning and behaving and carrying themselves now?
Yeah.
So that, I think that in turn makes me stay on top of my stuff, but also allows me to be an even better clinical supervisor.
This episode should be called The Pivot. You're moving into clinical health program manager roles, climbing the political government arena. We'll talk about that in a minute. How does this systems level work fulfill you in ways that one-on-one therapy never could?
I think the impact the fact that it impacts entire groups or entire businesses or communities. I think the fact that the impact is further reaching helps me feel a little bit more fulfilled. Now, don't get me wrong. I love when clients have an aha moment and they recognize that, okay, that's why I always pick the wrong person.
Mm-hmm.
Or that's why I'm stuck in this job.
God,
or that's why this keeps happening to me.
Or who you think you're talking to.
Right. Those aha moments I love with clients. But being able to help affect change in a group, an organization, a community, in any type of environment, and it's rewarding, and in many instances it's very humbling too. Just to see that what you say and what you do has such an impact on how people function and how they carry themselves and the decisions that they ultimately make and choose to implement. So I would say that's probably the most fulfilling part, is to recognize that what you say is subject matter expert material. And that any instances or moments where you feel like you were an imposter, gets thrown out the window. Because well, Dr. Harris said, well, Dr. King said, and I'm like, I did say that, and that didn't sound bad. And y'all implemented it, and y'all were successful.
And it worked.
Run it. And run me my check, but also run it.
On the next episode of Business in the Black, we continue our conversation with Dr. J. Ken Harris.
Little people, how did it feel? Walk us through that moment that you got a call from the Attorney General of the state of Massachusetts.
Ultimately, you have now created a bill for yourself because you are not living in the black.
Right. Okay.
You are 100%.
See what you did there.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And I've actually had job interviews where somebody said, I saw your video on X, Y, and Z.
Oh, wow.
I want to lead with, especially in the professional world, I prefer to lead with what I have done and what I've accomplished. And then on top of that, I'm black. So marinate on that.
If you can't see it.
Right. If you can't see it, and were there any questions?
Yeah.
So
that's another episode of Business in the Black, where Black entrepreneurs turn vision into victory. Ready for more game-changing strategies and success stories? Connect with us everywhere. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Business in the Black Pod. Spotify and Apple Podcast. Business in the Black. Keep building, keep growing, keep winning, and keep building your legacy.